Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Hans and I help expats find, analyze and invest in properties here in the German real estate market. If you need personalized support, make sure to visit germanrealty.org/services. Now to today's video. I want to address something which a lot of people feel whenever they first get started with investing in real estate. Fear of damage in the apartment, fear of a tenant not paying their rent, and overall just a fear of taking on too much risk. So in this video, I want to walk you through the most common concerns and give you practical answers for how to manage them. Here's what we're going to cover in this video. We'll start with the topic of damage in the overall building in which you buy, let's say, one unit. Then we'll move to what happens if something goes wrong in the apartment itself. After that, I'll explain what you can do if the tenant actually stops paying, which by the way, hardly ever happens. And finally, we'll end the video with tips for people who worry they won't be able to manage their rental property. I'll also share a real-life example from one of my apartments in Freiburg to show you how little work it actually involves once the things are set up correctly. And now let's jump in. So what happens if there's some damage to the building overall? If something happens to the building, let's say the roof leaks or a heating system breaks, you're usually not alone when it comes to dealing with that. That's because in most cases you're part of a so-called WEG or Wohnungseigentümergemeinschaft, like a community of owners who own different units in this overall building, right? Then there's also a property management company which takes care of this overall building. That's called the Hausverwaltung, and they take care of organizing repairs, getting quotes from contractors, and getting the approval for renovations, let's say, from all owners. In most cases, each owner pays into a shared maintenance reserve, also called a Rücklage here in Germany, and repairs are usually paid from that pool. If the reserve isn't big enough, there may be a special payment required from each owner, also called a Sonderumlage. And this in most cases only occurs if there's like a really big renovation upcoming, such as exchanging the heating system, the roof or the facade. And these special payments or the Sonderumlage is usually only necessary if there aren't enough funds in the reserves. And also this can only happen if all of the owners together decide that there needs to be this special payment in the ownership association meeting. Also, if you buy a relatively modern building, let's say it was built after the 80s, 90s or 2000s even, most major components like the heating system, the plumbing and electrical installations should still be up to date. However, it's always important to actually read the protocols from the past ownership meetings to see if anything big, like bigger renovations, are upcoming. And that way you know what kinds of costs you can expect in the next couple of years. Now next, what happens if there's actually something happening in the apartment, right? If something breaks, let's say the tap is leaking, a window doesn't close properly, or there's even mold, then yes, you as the owner are usually responsible for that. But that doesn't mean you have to fix everything yourself. In most cases, I would say small issues can be fixed by a handyman and you don't have to go there yourself. If you don't live nearby, you can just call somebody like a contractor who should take care of this. Many repair jobs, such as fixing a dripping faucet or adjusting a window hinge, usually just takes less than a day. If the tenant caused the damage, of course he or she needs to pay for it. If it's normal wear and tear, that's usually on you. And sometimes things just wear out, like an old kitchen tab or shower head. That's part of owning a property. For this, it's always good to put aside some money for you to sort of build up your own reserves for your individual unit. Let's say a few €100, depending on the size, of course, per year. Then you also have the option to hire something called a Sonderverwaltung. It's like an additional service the management company provides. Possibly it's even the same management company which takes care of the overall building anyways. In most cases, they also offer this additional service, as I said, called Sonderverwaltung, and by that they take care of the inner workings of your apartment. That's usually an additional 30 to 50 euros per month, but if you really don't want to manage anything about your rental property, you can easily just get this additional service. They usually handle all tenant communication, including smaller repairs such as finding handyman, coordinating appointments, and keeping track of the incoming rent. It's a great option for people who want to be fully hands-off. And now let me give you a quick real-life example here. In one of my apartments, which I've owned for the past 3 years now, I only had one tenant move out and I needed to find a new tenant. Because rental demand is very strong in Freiburg, that really wasn't difficult, right? I put an ad on eBay Kleinanzeigen. I had it online for like 10 minutes and I got like, I don't know, 20, 30 requests for people wanting to view the apartment to then rent it out. So that really didn't take me long. In this 3-year time span in which I've owned this property already, I had to fix the toilet once. In this case, I didn't do it myself. I hired a handyman since I wasn't nearby in the region anyways. I had somebody come over and fix the toilet for me. That costs around 150 euros, which I was glad to pay, of course. And that was pretty much it. Apart from that, I didn't have to do anything with this apartment. The property management company, which takes care of the overall building, took care of a more significant issue, a leaking roof in this case. They gathered quotes from contractors, they organized the repair, and the costs for that were paid by the building's reserves. And for this one, I didn't have to be involved at all. Me, myself, I don't use a Sonderverwaltung, this additional service I mentioned a few seconds ago, as I like and I can do most of the work myself, right? I usually check my properties once a year, which means that I'll actually go there, have a look at the apartment to check if something needs to be fixed, but that's pretty much it. Maybe one last tip, in case you do need to actually fix something and you don't know who to call, there's a website called Meine on which you can sort of post an ad of what needs to be done, and then different craftsmen apply for this single job. And give you quotes for how much it would cost. I've used Meine a couple of times. This is of course not an ad here, but I can highly recommend it just to find basic craftsmen. So now let's talk about what happens if the tenant actually stops paying. That's of course a fear many new landlords have, but in reality it's very, very rare. In my experience, out of, let's say, 100 renters, 1 or 2 maximum will miss a rent payment or be late. And that means 98 or 99% of the tenants actually pay on time. And for me, that's a very low risk scenario, right? It hasn't happened with any of my apartments in the last couple of years. Still, of course, it's good to be prepared. If a tenant misses his or her payment, you should start off with sending a friendly reminder. Oftentimes it's just a bank delay or they just forgot to transfer the money. If nothing happens, then you can send a formal letter to their address indicating a strict deadline. And after that, if a couple of weeks or up to 2 months go unpaid, you are legally allowed to terminate the rental contract and start an eviction process. Now that eviction process can take up to, 2 to 3 years maximum, I would say. That's a very long time, right? Considering that you don't get any rent paid in that time span. However, as I said, I think this really rarely ever happens, and especially if you screen your tenants well before you let them rent out your apartment. That's why I always ask for a proof of income, like I want to see their payslips. I also ask for their Schufa report and previous landlord references if possible. In addition, of course, I collect a security deposit once they move in. Now let's talk about another fear actually many landlords have as well. What if I don't find the time to manage the property myself? And I totally get it, right? You're busy with your main job, you maybe even have a family, and then you don't want to bother with renters. But here's the truth. Real estate in Germany, especially if you're buying small apartments in well-managed buildings, is not that time consuming. In most cases, after the purchase is complete, the only thing you usually do is receive your rent and pay your mortgage. And that's it. As said previously, I try to check the apartments once a year, check on its overall condition, whether they're smoking inside, which I try to prohibit, and whether the silicone joints in the bathroom need to be replaced in order to prevent water damages. Yes, sometimes a tenant actually calls or an issue comes up, but those moments are rare. For most of my properties, I don't hear from the tenant for months or sometimes even 1 to 2 years. If something comes up, I can deal with it in just a few minutes or hours, call a plumber, approve a quote, and so on. And most things I can handle completely remotely, right? I said this in many videos before. I actually live in Berlin now, but all of my properties are all the way across Germany, in the south of Germany, in Freiburg to be precise. And I can totally manage most of it from up here. And I think you can even do that if you're living abroad and have a unit here in Germany, right? In case some of you guys are thinking about moving back to your home country at some point, I'm sure you can just get a Sonderverwaltung, the special service I talked about a couple of times now, in order to then don't have to manage anything in Germany here at all. So now, to wrap things up, yes, things can go wrong in real estate, but they rarely do, I would say, especially if you buy like older apartments between the 80s and 2000s. There shouldn't be any big renovations coming up, and that should be totally fine for the next couple of years. Even if something comes up, It's easily manageable, especially if you're prepared well. Damage in the overall building, there's a WEG or Wohnungseigentümergemeinschaft and ownership association, you do have the management company, and you do have the reserves. Repairs in the apartment, easily fixable and outsourceable if you want to. A non-paying tenant, rare but still solvable with this legal process. Not enough time, just automate or delegate. If you're still unsure or need help analyzing or finding a property, as I said at the beginning, I offer one-on-one consultations which you can book at germanrealty.org/services. We can walk through your numbers, look at properties together, and develop a smart strategy that fit your goals. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you guys soon. Take care. Bye.